They tied the paralyzed Apache girl to the rancher's mailbox as a joke, but he took her in and the sun was beginning to set over the quiet town that lay at the edge of the wide, open plains. The sky was painted with soft shades of pink and orange, casting long shadows across the dusty roads and scattered houses. In this small town, life moved slowly, and most people knew each other. Everyone had their place, their routines, and their ways of thinking. But for some, like a young Apache girl named Lila, life was not always kind. She was different from most children in the town, not because she wanted to be, but because her body could not always keep up with her spirit. Lila had a condition that made it difficult for her to move. Some days she could walk with help, other days she could barely sit without support. She had always been careful, quiet, and aware of how others might treat her. That evening, as the wind carried the smell of dry grass and earth, a group of local boys gathered near the edge of town. They were restless, looking for amusement as the golden light faded. In their eyes, anything unusual in their small town was a target for jokes. When they noticed Lila moving slowly along the dusty road toward her home, they saw an opportunity to have a funny moment at her expense. They ran ahead of her, laughing and whispering ideas to each other. None of them stopped to think about how their actions might hurt someone. Their only thought was the thrill of a prank. Lila sensed something was off the moment she saw the boys running toward her. She slowed her pace, gripping the straps of her walker tightly, hoping they would pass her by. But it was too late. In a cruel instant, they surrounded her, shouting and teasing. Before she could react, they had tied her to a mailbox outside a rancher's property. The rough rope cut slightly into her skin, and she felt a mix of fear, embarrassment, and confusion. She wanted to cry, but the words wouldn't come. She looked around for help, but the boys ran off laughing, leaving her alone and exposed. Her heart pounded, and tears pricked her eyes as she tried to free herself. Just then, the rancher, Mr. Samuel, was returning home from a long day working on his land. He was an older man with weathered skin from years of sun and wind, but his eyes were sharp and observant. He had lived in the area all his life and knew almost everyone in town. He had a reputation for being kind but firm, a man who believed in justice and helping those in need. That evening, he noticed something unusual from the porch of his home. There, tied to his mailbox, was Lila, his brow furrowed as he quickly approached, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Lila's eyes widened as she saw him. She had hoped someone would notice her, but now that he was here, she didn't know what to expect. The boys had always told her to stay out of trouble, and she had tried to do so, but here she was, in the middle of what felt like disaster. Mr. Samuel knelt down beside her, his voice calm and gentle. "It's okay, little one," he said. "You're safe now." Carefully, he untied the rope, making sure not to hurt her further. Lila shivered, both from the cold evening air and the lingering fear from the prank. She didn't speak at first, unsure if she could trust anyone, but there was something in his manner, something steady and sincere, that made her heart feel slightly lighter. "Why would they do this?" she whispered finally, her voice small and trembling. "They're foolish children," Mr. Samuel said with a quiet firmness. "They don't understand how cruel their actions are. But you don't have to worry about them anymore."
"You're safe here." Even though Lila had been hurt, physically and emotionally, she felt a flicker of hope.
For the first time in her life, someone saw her not as a burden or a target for jokes, but as a person who deserved care and respect. Samuel helped her stand, steadying her as best he could, and led her toward the ranch house. The path was rough and uneven, but he never let go of her arm, making sure she wouldn't fall. As they walked, Lila noticed the ranch. It was simple but welcoming, with a wide porch, sturdy wooden beams, and a small garden full of flowers and vegetables. The smell of fresh bread and herbs hung faintly in the air, and the soft light from inside made the house seem warm and inviting. Lila had never been inside a home like this before. Most of the houses she knew in town were cramped or poorly cared for, and people often treated her as if she was fragile or incapable. But here, everything felt different. Here, she felt a sense of safety she had never known. Mr. Samuel settled her into a comfortable chair in the living room, placing a soft blanket over her legs. He offered her a glass of water and some bread, simple things, but gestures that made Lila feel human again. She noticed that he did not treat her differently because of her condition. He treated her like any guest in his home, with kindness and respect. As she ate quietly, she looked around the room and realized how much thought had gone into it. There were books on the shelves, photographs of family and friends, and small decorations that made the house feel alive. For the first time, she felt that someone cared not just about her body, but about her life and her experiences. They talked softly for a while. Lila told him about the prank, about how the boys had laughed at her, and about the fear she had felt. She spoke slowly, not wanting to tire herself, but each word was filled with honesty and emotion. Mr. Samuel listened without interrupting, nodding gently and occasionally asking questions to make sure he understood. He did not rush her, did not make her feel small. He simply listened, and that simple act made Lila feel stronger. "You know," he said finally, "life can be unfair, and people can be unkind, but you don't have to face it alone. If you want, you can stay here for as long as you need. You don't have to go back to those who would hurt you." Lila's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not just tears of fear, they were tears of relief. Relief that someone had chosen to help her. Relief that she had found a place where she could feel safe. She nodded, unable to speak, but her heart spoke louder than words ever could. In that moment, a bond was formed, one built on trust, care, and the promise of safety. Outside, the sky had grown darker, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. But inside the small ranch house, there was warmth and light. Lila felt a sense of hope growing within her, a feeling she had almost forgotten. She realized that not all people were cruel, and that kindness could come from the most unexpected places. Mr. Samuel's quiet strength and willingness to help her had already changed the course of her evening, and she sensed that it might even change the course of her life. That night, as Lila rested under the soft blanket, she thought about the boys who had left her tied to the mailbox. She no longer felt the same fear or anger she had felt earlier. Instead, she felt a determination to hold on to the kindness that had been offered to her. For the first time, she understood that even in a world that could be harsh and unfair, there were people who would stand up for what was right, who would protect those who were vulnerable. And perhaps, she thought, she could learn to be strong in her own way, just as Mr. Samuel had shown her. The sun had set completely now, leaving the sky deep blue, dotted with stars. Inside the ranch house, Lila closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe. She felt safe. She felt cared for. And for the first time in a long while, she felt the faint but undeniable spark of hope that things could get better. The evening had begun with fear and cruelty, but it ended with kindness and a promise that someone would stand by her, no matter what. The next morning, Lila woke to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. Sunlight streamed gently into the small room where she had been placed the night before. She felt a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. The events of yesterday still lingered in her mind. The cruel prank, the fear, and then the surprising kindness of Mr. Samuel. She had never experienced anything like it before. Her life had been full of challenges, but in all her struggles, no one had ever treated her with such calm care and genuine concern. "Mister," Samuel appeared at the doorway with a warm smile. "Good morning, Lila," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Lila nodded quietly, not trusting her voice to speak right away. She still felt shy and unsure, but she could sense that the rancher was patient, that he would not rush her or force her into anything uncomfortable. He came closer, gently helping her adjust in the chair so she could get ready for breakfast. The table was already set with eggs, toast, and fresh milk. Everything was simple but made with care, and Lila noticed how clean and organized the kitchen was. She had lived in small homes before, but this was different. This place felt safe, like someone had thought about what would make her comfortable. As they ate, Mr. Samuel talked about small things, how the weather had been over the past few days, how the crops in his garden were growing, and what chores he would be doing later in the day. Lila listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes asking a small question. She felt a strange but welcome sensation in her chest, a feeling of belonging that she had never experienced before. She realized she had never stayed in one place where someone truly wanted to help her, not because they had to, but because they cared. After breakfast, Samuel helped Lila into a special chair he had in the living room, designed to give her more support.
"We have a lot of work to do today," he said gently.
"But don't worry, I'll help you every step of the way." Lila looked at him, a mix of curiosity and concern in her eyes. She knew work could be hard, especially with her condition, but something about the way he spoke made her believe she could do it. She had never been asked to do things in this way before, not with encouragement, not with patience. Their first task of the day was simple but meaningful. Mr. Samuel had a small garden behind the house, filled with vegetables and flowers. The soil needed turning, and the plants needed water. At first, Lila felt unsure. She had never gardened before, and she worried she might get in the way. But Mr. Roden, Samuel guided her carefully. He helped her reach the plants and taught her how to water them gently, how to touch the soil without hurting the roots. She began to notice the plants responding to her care. The leaves looked brighter, the soil smelled fresh, and even the flowers seemed to turn slightly toward her. For the first time, she felt that her actions could make a difference, even if they were small. As the day passed, Mr. Samuel showed Lila other chores around the ranch. She learned how to feed the chickens, sweep the porch, and help with the laundry. Each task was carefully explained, and he made sure she could participate safely. Sometimes she fell or struggled to reach something, but he was always there to steady her or guide her hand. Lila began to understand that strength wasn't always about being fast or powerful. It could also be about patience, persistence, and the willingness to try. She felt a small but growing sense of pride. She was contributing, she was learning, and for the first time, she felt capable. Throughout the day, they also talked about life. Mr. Samuel listened to Lila's stories about her family, her life in town, and the teasing she had endured from other children. He asked questions, not to judge or criticize, but to understand her better. Lila felt that she could speak freely without fear. Her voice, which had often been silenced by others, began to grow stronger. She realized that someone was actually listening, someone who valued her thoughts and feelings. The small moments of conversation became as important as the chores themselves, each one building trust and connection. By afternoon, a few townspeople started to notice that Lila was at the ranch. Some were curious, while others whispered and shook their heads. They had long believed that she was fragile or different in a way that required pity or avoidance. Seeing her at the ranch with Mr. Samuel challenged their assumptions. Lila could sense the change in the way people looked at her. For the first time, she noticed that some of their expressions carried surprise and even respect. It was strange, but empowering. She began to understand that her worth was not determined by the judgments of others, but by the actions of those who truly cared for her. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the plains with gold and shadow, Mr. Samuel led Lila to a small area near the barn. He had set up a few simple obstacles for her to practice moving with her chair. The exercises were designed not as punishment, but as a way to help her gain more independence. At first, she hesitated, afraid of falling or failing. But with gentle encouragement, she tried. She moved slowly, carefully, and with determination. Each small success, a turn, a stop, a step forward, brought a smile to her face and a nod of approval from Mr. Gladstone. Samuel, it was exhausting work, but Lila felt alive in a way she had not felt before. Her body might be limited, but her mind and spirit were learning to overcome those limits. Evening came, and the sky turned deep blue. The work of the day was done, but the lessons Lila had learned were just beginning to sink in. She realized that life at the ranch was not about magic or instant miracles. It was about patience, care, and the belief that every person had potential, no matter their circumstances. Mr. Samuel's simple acts of kindness, his steady guidance, and his trust in her abilities had shown her that she could do more than she had ever imagined. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one, Lila felt a sense of peace she had never known. The world outside might be harsh, and some people might still laugh at her or treat her differently, but here, in this quiet ranch surrounded by nature and kindness, she had found a place where she belonged. Mr. Samuel spoke softly about the importance of helping others, about how strength could come in many forms, and how courage was sometimes found in simply continuing, even when life was difficult. Lila listened, absorbing every word, and felt her heart swell with hope. Over the following days, a routine began to form. Lila would wake, eat, and participate in chores around the ranch. She practiced moving with her chair, learned new tasks, and spoke more freely with Mr. Samuel. Each day, she discovered a little more about her own abilities, and each day her confidence grew. She also noticed small changes in herself. Her hands were steadier, her mind sharper, and her heart more open. She felt stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The kindness and patience shown to her had taught her something important, that she could trust, that she could be capable, and that she could make a difference in her own life. By the end of that first week, Lila realized something remarkable. She had come to the ranch feeling fragile, scared, and alone. But now, she felt like she was part of something larger than herself. She was learning, growing, and discovering a sense of purpose. The ranch was no longer just a place of shelter. It was a place of hope, of learning, and of new beginnings. Mr. Pockott came in. Samuel's belief in her had ignited a spark within her, a spark that told her she could face the world, step by step, and find her own strength. As the moon rose and cast its silver light over the plains, Lila felt a deep sense of gratitude. She knew the journey ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but she also knew she was not alone. With Mr. Samuel by her side, guiding, teaching, and supporting her, she had found the courage to face whatever came next. And in that quiet, starlit moment, she allowed herself to hope for a future filled with possibility, kindness, and strength, a future she had never imagined could exist for her. The days at the ranch passed steadily, each one bringing new experiences and lessons for Lila. Life had begun to feel different from anything she had known in town. Instead of fear, teasing, or loneliness, She now experienced care, patience, and a sense of purpose. She had begun to wake each morning with curiosity rather than anxiety, wondering what the day would bring. She was learning that the world could be kinder than she had imagined, and that she herself was stronger than she had ever believed. One morning, as the sunlight spilled across the porch, Mr. Samuel came out with a determined expression. "Today," he said, "we're going to do something a little harder." Lila looked up at him, a mixture of excitement and worry in her eyes. She had grown accustomed to the chores around the house and garden, but she knew that anything described as harder could challenge her. She trusted him, however, and nodded. She had come to understand that he would never ask her to do something impossible, only something that would help her grow. He led her toward the barn where a small fenced area held a few goats and chickens. "Part of living on a ranch," he explained, "is caring for the animals. They depend on us, and in return, we learn patience, responsibility, and respect." Lila had never had much experience with animals. In town, she had only seen them briefly, often in cages or fenced yards. Here they moved freely and naturally. Their soft sounds and curious eyes made her both nervous and fascinated. "Start with the goats." "Mr. Bow," Samuel said, "they're friendly, but they need gentle hands." He helped her lower herself carefully into a seat that allowed her to be at the animal's level. At first the goats approached her cautiously, sniffing her hands and nudging gently. Lila froze for a moment, afraid of startling them, but Mr. Samuel smiled. "Go slowly. Talk to them. Let them get to know you." She began to speak softly to the animals, her voice almost a whisper. "Hello." "Hello there," she said. One goat lifted its head, blinking slowly, then walked closer. She reached out gently, stroking its soft fur. Her heart swelled as the goat nudged her hand, trusting her. For the first time, Lila felt that she could connect with another living being, not through words or action, but through patience and gentleness. The small triumph gave her confidence, and she began to feed the other goats with careful, steady movements. After a while, they moved to the chickens. Lila had learned to carry the food in a small bucket, and the chickens quickly gathered around her feet. At first, she was startled by their pecking and sudden movements, but with Mr. Samuel's guidance, she learned to anticipate their actions and feed them calmly. Each successful step made her feel capable, proud, and alive. She realized that even though her body moved slowly, her mind and spirit could accomplish more than she had thought possible. The afternoon brought another challenge. Mr. Samuel took Lila to the edge of a small hill behind the ranch. The area had uneven ground, rocks, and brush. He wanted her to practice moving her chair over different types of terrain, building both her skill and confidence. Lila felt a shiver of anxiety. The ground looked unpredictable and difficult. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You can," he said firmly but kindly. "I'll be right beside you. Step by step, we'll go together." They began slowly, Lila moving carefully while Mr. Samuel guided her. Above, at times she stumbled, her chair catching on a rock or uneven patch of soil, but he never scolded her or rushed her. He simply steadied her, encouraged her, and reminded her to breathe. With every small success, crossing a patch of dirt, avoiding a larger rock, making it up a slight incline, Lila felt a new sense of achievement. By the time they reached the top of the hill, she was tired but exhilarated. She realized she could do more than she had thought, and that fear could be overcome with patience, guidance, and persistence. As the sun began to dip behind the distant mountains, Mr. Samuel suggested they sit on a large rock overlooking the plains. The view was breathtaking. The town, the fields, and the river sparkled in the late light. "Look at this," he said softly. "You've made it up here."
You faced challenges today and succeeded. That is strength, Lila.
Strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's mental, sometimes it's simply refusing to give up. Lila listened quietly, feeling a warmth in her chest that was almost new to her. She had always thought of herself as weak or limited because of her condition. But here, with Mr. Brenton, Samuel's guidance, she was learning that strength was not about being like everyone else. Strength was about persistence, courage, and belief in oneself. She felt proud of herself in a way she had never imagined possible. Over the next few weeks, Lila's confidence grew. She began to move more easily in her chair, mastering the hills, uneven ground, and small obstacles around the ranch. She learned to help more with the animals, to plant seeds in the garden, and to complete daily tasks independently. Each small victory was celebrated quietly but meaningfully by Mr. Samuel. He never made her feel pressured or ashamed. Instead, he encouraged her, praised her efforts, and reminded her that every step forward mattered. One day, while helping in the garden, Lila noticed something remarkable. A few neighbors had stopped to watch her, curious about the girl who had come to the ranch after the cruel prank. Some whispered, some shook their heads, but a few looked at her with a newfound respect. They saw her moving confidently, feeding animals, and working alongside Mr. Samuel. For the first time, Lila realized that her actions, her courage, and her determination could change the way others saw her. She was no longer simply the girl who had been tied to a mailbox. She was becoming someone strong, capable, and respected. Mr. Samuel noticed her thoughtful expression and smiled. "You see, Lila," he said, "people can surprise you. Sometimes they are slow to understand, but actions speak louder than words. Keep doing what you're doing. You're showing them who you really are." Lila nodded, feeling a rush of pride and determination. She began to see that the ranch was not only helping her physically, but also teaching her lessons about life, courage, and self-respect. She was learning that she could face difficulties and still succeed. She could make a difference in her own life, and perhaps even in the lives of others around her. But it was not all easy. There were moments when she fell, when her chair got stuck, when her muscles ached, or when she felt frustrated and discouraged. On those days, Mr. Samuel was patient. He reminded her that failure was part of learning, that mistakes were simply steps on the path to success. He never let her feel small or incapable. Each time she struggled, she learned resilience, patience, and the value of trying again. Slowly, Lila discovered that she had more strength than she had ever realized. One afternoon, as they rested after a long morning of chores, Lila looked at Mr. Samuel and asked a question she had never dared to ask before. Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. He paused for a moment, thinking carefully. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. "Everyone deserves care, respect, and a chance to grow. You have a spirit that is strong and brave, Lila. I want to help you see that for yourself." His words settled deep into her heart. She realized that this man had chosen to see her for who she was, not for what others thought of her. He had given her trust, patience, and opportunity, the very things she had needed all her life. And in return, she felt a growing sense of hope, confidence, and determination to live fully, despite her challenges. By the end of Part 3, Lila had transformed in small but powerful ways. She was more confident in her abilities, more aware of her own strength, and more willing to face the world with courage. Life at the ranch had taught her that success was not measured by how fast or strong she was, but by her persistence, her willingness to learn, and her courage to keep moving forward. She began to believe that the world could be kind, that people could change, and that her own life could hold joy, purpose, and achievement. The ranch, with its wide open spaces, animals, and tasks, had become a place of growth, learning, and possibility. And Mr. Samuel, with his quiet wisdom and unwavering patience, had become more than a caretaker. He had become a mentor, a guide, and a steady presence in her life. Lila now looked forward to each new day with curiosity and determination. She knew the challenges would continue to come, but she also knew that she had the courage, patience, and support to face them, and perhaps even inspire others along the way. Life at the ranch had settled into a gentle rhythm for Lila. Each day was filled with work, learning, and small victories. She had grown stronger and more confident, mastering her chair, helping with chores, and learning to care for the animals. Yet, life beyond the ranch remained complicated. The small town nearby had not forgotten her, or the prank that had once humiliated her. Some people still whispered when they saw her. Others avoided her entirely. Lila had begun to notice these reactions, and while they did not frighten her as before, they stirred a quiet ache in her heart. One morning, as Lila and Mr. Samuel worked in the garden, a group of townspeople stopped near the fence. Some were curious neighbors, and others were people who had witnessed the prank and had long assumed Lila was helpless. They watched silently at first, whispering among themselves. Lila froze for a moment, unsure whether she should keep working or hide. But Mr. Samuel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Keep going," he said. "Show them who you really are." Lila nodded, drawing strength from his words. She continued tending the plants, watering carefully, and gently pulling weeds. Each movement was deliberate, calm, and full of purpose. She began to notice the way the people were watching her, not with mockery, but with surprise. They saw a girl who could work, who could move with determination, and who could accomplish tasks others might not have expected. The shift was subtle at first, but it was real. Lila felt a quiet pride rise within her. She was showing them that she was capable and strong, even with her challenges. After a few minutes, one of the women, who had always been distant toward Lila, stepped forward. I didn't know you could do this," she said softly. "You're, Lila looked up, startled. She had never heard such words spoken sincerely before. The woman nodded, almost shyly, and returned to the others. Slowly, more people began to speak, some offering small gestures of encouragement or asking questions about the garden. Lila realized that her presence, her actions, and her determination were changing how the town saw her. Encouraged by this, Mr. Samuel suggested that Lila help with a larger project on the ranch. He had a small fence that needed repair, and he thought it would be a good opportunity for her to continue building confidence. Lila was nervous at first. Fixing a fence seemed like a big task. But with careful instructions, tools within reach, and his constant support, she began to learn. She handled the hammer and nails slowly but steadily, guided by his patient hand. Each piece she completed brought satisfaction and a sense of achievement. Charm! As the day went on, word spread further. A few townspeople returned, watching from a respectful distance. Some brought small gifts, extra vegetables from their gardens or baked goods, offering quiet congratulations. Lila was surprised. She had expected judgment or avoidance, but instead, she began to see curiosity, respect, and even admiration. The town's attitude was changing, slowly but undeniably. She realized that people could be influenced not just by words, but by consistent action, courage, and integrity. However, not everyone responded positively. Some of the teens who had been part of the prank continued to whisper and mock from afar. At first, their laughter made Lila nervous. She remembered the fear, embarrassment, and isolation from before. But with Mr. Bob Samuel's guidance, she began to understand that their words had no power over her unless she allowed them.
"Ignore them," he said gently.
Focus on what matters, your work, your growth, and the people who truly care about you. Lila nodded, taking his advice to heart. Slowly, the power of the past prank began to fade, replaced by her own confidence and determination. One afternoon, a challenge arose that tested Lila in a new way. A sudden storm rolled in from the plains, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The animals in the barn became restless, the garden flooded in places, and the small paths around the ranch turned to mud. Lila felt fear creep in. The storm was loud, overwhelming, and frightening. But Samuel remained calm, speaking in a steady voice. "We can do this," he said. "Step by step, we will take care of everything. I'll be with you." Together they moved to secure the animals. Lila pushed her chair over slippery ground, helping to guide the goats and chickens into safer areas. She learned to adjust her movements carefully, keeping her balance while managing the animals' needs. The storm raged on, but she did not panic. She realized that fear could be managed with focus, courage, and calmness. By the time the rain slowed, she was exhausted but triumphant. She had faced something frightening and succeeded, proving to herself that she could handle difficult situations. After the storm, Lila noticed how some of the townspeople had come out to check on the ranch. They saw her working in the mud, helping the animals, and standing tall despite the storm's chaos. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to admiration. Lila understood that courage and action could influence perception more than words ever could. People began to see her not as a victim or a target, but as someone capable, brave, and determined. The following week brought another opportunity for Lila to shine. A local fair was being held, and Mr. Samuel suggested she participate in a small exhibition of animals and gardening skills. Lila was nervous. A bit. She had never been part of a public event like this, especially with people from town who had once mocked her. But she trusted Mr. Morey. Samuel agreed. Together they prepared the animals, polished the garden displays, and practiced the tasks she would demonstrate. Lila felt a mixture of excitement and fear, but also a growing sense of readiness. On the day of the fair, the town gathered in the central field. Lila moved with her chair through the crowd, showing the goats, feeding the chickens, and explaining her garden work to curious visitors. People listened, asked questions, and began to recognize her efforts. Some nodded, some smiled, and some whispered quietly to each other. Lila realized that this was more than just a fair. It was an opportunity to show the town who she really was. With each task she completed, she felt stronger, more confident, and more proud of herself. The reaction was encouraging. People approached her afterward, complimenting her work, asking for advice on gardening or caring for animals, and even apologizing for past judgments. Lila felt a quiet but powerful sense of accomplishment. She understood that patience, courage, and consistent effort could change hearts and minds. She also realized that she no longer feared judgment as she once had. She had found her voice, her strength, and her place in the world. Yet the journey was ongoing. Some individuals in town remained doubtful or resistant to change. Lila learned to navigate their reactions with calmness, understanding that not everyone would embrace her courage immediately. But she also learned the value of persistence, the importance of focusing on the positive, and the power of leading by example. Each interaction became a chance to grow, to teach, and to show that kindness, patience, and courage could influence even the most hesitant hearts. One evening, as Lila and Mr. Howard, Samuel sat on the porch after a long day, she reflected on how far she had come. She had faced fear, cruelty, and doubt, yet she had grown stronger, more confident, and more independent. She realized that her journey was not only about surviving, but also about thriving, about learning to face challenges, inspire others, and embrace life fully. Mr. Samuel watched her quietly. "You've done well," he said. "Not because life has been easy, but because you've chosen to rise above it. You've shown courage, patience, and kindness. That is strength, Lila. Never forget it." Lila smiled, a deep sense of peace settling within her. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had found her courage, her purpose, and her place in the world, and through her journey she had begun to change the town itself, inspiring others to see the value in patience, respect, and determination. By the end of Part 4, Lila had not only grown stronger personally, but had also started to change the way her community viewed her. The girl who had once been tied to a mailbox as a joke was now a symbol of courage, resilience, and hope. Her story reminded everyone that kindness, determination, and belief in oneself could overcome fear, prejudice, and misunderstanding. Lila had learned that her life was not defined by the cruelty of others, but by her own courage, her choices, and the people who truly believed in her. Serving peace of eye as passing to Elia, the girl who had once been tied to a mailbox as a cruel joke, had grown into a young woman full of confidence, strength, and grace. Life at the ranch had shaped her in ways she had never imagined. Each day of hard work, patience, and learning had left a mark, not only on her body and mind, but on her spirit. She moved through the ranch with skill and independence, her chair no longer a symbol of limitation, but a tool that allowed her to navigate the world with courage and determination. Lila had also grown in her understanding of people. She had learned that while some could be cruel or unkind, others could be compassionate, patient, and inspiring. Mr. Samuel had been her guide, teaching her that strength came in many forms, through persistence, resilience, and the willingness to rise above fear and judgment. His unwavering belief in her had planted a seed of self-confidence that had grown into a tree of hope and courage. She now understood that her own choices, her own determination, and the kindness of others could shape her life in remarkable ways. The ranch had become more than just a home. It had become a place of learning, growth, and opportunity. Lila had developed a deep love for the animals, the garden, and the open plains that stretched beyond the horizon. She could feed the goats, gather eggs, plant seeds, and navigate the land with ease. But beyond these daily tasks, she had also grown in wisdom and compassion. She had learned to see the value in every life, to understand that small acts of care could create profound change. One morning, a visitor arrived at the ranch. It was a teacher from the town school, curious about Lila and her progress. The teacher had heard about the girl who had once been mocked and was eager to learn how she had grown so confident and skilled. Lila welcomed the visitor warmly, showing her the garden, introducing her to the animals, and explaining the routines of ranch life. She spoke clearly and confidently, sharing her experiences and lessons with a calm, inspiring presence. The teacher was amazed at how much Lila had accomplished and how her spirit had flourished. Word of Lila's growth continued to spread throughout the town. People who had once laughed or whispered now approached her with respect and admiration. Some sought advice on gardening, animal care, or even life lessons. Lila realized that she had become more than just a young woman who had faced hardship. She had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and hope. Her journey showed others that even in the face of cruelty or limitation, it was possible to rise, to grow, and to make a difference. Despite her growing independence and confidence, Lila never forgot the kindness of Mr. Samuel. He remained a constant presence in her life, a mentor, guide, and friend. He taught her not only practical skills but also lessons of character, integrity, and patience. Lila often reflected on the moment he had first untied her from that mailbox, the calm strength he had shown, and the belief he had placed in her. That moment had changed everything. It had given her the chance to grow, to learn, and to become the person she was now. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Lila spoke about her future. "I want to help others," she said softly. "I want to show them that they can be strong, even if life is hard. I want to help people who feel small or afraid, like I once did."
Mr. Samuel smiled, his eyes warm.
"You can," he said. "Your life and your story can inspire more than you realize. By helping others, you will continue to grow, and you will make the world a better place."
Lila began to take small steps towards this vision.
She started working with children in the town who had disabilities or faced challenges. She shared her experiences, taught them practical skills, and offered encouragement. She visited schools, participated in community projects, and quietly inspired those around her. People listened to her because she had lived what she taught. Her actions spoke louder than words, and her courage encouraged others to see possibilities rather than limitations. At the same time, Lila maintained her deep connection to the ranch. The land, animals, and daily work continued to nurture her body, mind, and spirit. She found joy in small routines, watering the plants, tending the garden, feeding the goats, and enjoying the quiet beauty of the open plains. Life was not always easy, but she had learned that perseverance, patience, and compassion could transform challenges into opportunities. Each day she felt more capable, more confident, and more determined to live fully. The town itself began to change as well. Witnessing Lila's courage and growth inspired others to reconsider their own attitudes and behaviors. Prejudices and judgments slowly gave way to curiosity, understanding, and respect. Children who had once mocked her began to look up to her. Adults who had doubted her abilities began to ask for her advice. Lila's presence, resilience, and achievements became a quiet force for positive change in the community. People began to see not only what she could do, but what anyone could accomplish with patience, courage, and support. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant colors over the plains, Lila and Mr. Samuel walked through the garden. The plants were flourishing, the animals were calm, and the air was filled with the sounds of nature. Lila reflected on how much she had grown, not just in skill, but in spirit. She remembered the fear she had felt when tied to the mailbox, the uncertainty she had felt in her first days at the ranch, and the struggles she had faced along the way. She realized that every challenge had taught her something valuable, shaping her into a person who could face life with courage and determination. "I never imagined I could be like this," she said softly, looking at the horizon. Strong, confident, and able to help others.
It feels amazing, Mr.
Samuel nodded. "You earned it, Lila. Through patience, courage, and belief in yourself, you transformed your life. And now you have the power to inspire others." As years continued, Lila's story became a part of the town's history. She became known not for the cruel joke that had once defined her, but for her courage, kindness, and resilience. Children learned from her example that challenges could be overcome, and adults remembered that patience and guidance could unlock potential in ways they had never imagined. Lila's life became a living lesson that one act of kindness, one person's belief in another, could ripple outward to change not only a life but an entire community. Yet, Lila remained humble. She never sought fame or recognition. She focused on helping others, growing in knowledge, and living each day with purpose. The ranch, with its wide open spaces, animals, and routines, remained her sanctuary, a place where she could continue to learn, reflect, and find joy. She understood that life would always bring challenges, but she had the tools, the confidence, and the spirit to face them. One day a young girl came to the ranch, timid and uncertain, much like Lila had been years before. Lila guided her patiently, showing her how to care for the animals, tend the garden, and navigate her own limitations with confidence. As the girl's fear began to fade and her courage grew, Lila saw herself reflected in the child's eyes. She understood that her journey had come full circle. The care and guidance she had received from Mr. Samuel had now become her gift to someone else. Lila's legacy extended beyond the ranch. She taught the town that kindness, patience, and encouragement could transform lives. She reminded them that strength is not measured by speed or physical ability, but by courage, resilience, and the willingness to face challenges. And she proved that one person's belief in another could ripple outward, creating hope, change, and inspiration for generations. As the sun set over the plains once again, Lila sat on the porch, feeling the gentle warmth of the evening air. She looked at the garden, the animals, and the open fields beyond, and she felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. Life had not always been easy, but she had faced every challenge with courage and determination. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more compassionate, and in doing so, she had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of everyone around her. The girl who had once been tied to a mailbox as a joke had become a woman of strength, resilience, and inspiration. Lila had discovered that even in the face of cruelty and doubt, hope, courage, and kindness could prevail. Her story reminded everyone that one act of compassion, one person's belief in another, could change the world, one life at a time. And so, Lila continued to live at the ranch, teaching, guiding, and inspiring others. She carried the lessons of her journey in her heart, spreading courage and hope wherever she went. Life remained full of challenges, but she faced each one with determination, knowing that the strength she had discovered within herself was more powerful than any obstacle. Her story, once marked by fear and cruelty, had become a story of resilience, love, and the unbreakable human spirit.